Have you ever walked through many different suburbs and thought, wow, these all look very similar? Yeah, Vox did a video on that 3 years ago. I'm not original, but wait, there's a deeper point to this. Have you ever thought, wow, these all look very similar, but if beautiful architecture reflects a community's shared identity, then this is some pretty ugly stuff, cause no way all these neighborhoods have the exact same identity. That's right, we are talking about architectural beauty and how America's housing plans have killed it. But let's not get confused. When I say beauty, I don't mean what most of us instinctively think of. I'm not rating the visual appeal of American houses, nor am I saying that one style is objectively more pleasant to look at than another. Architectural beauty is going to have to do with reflecting community identity. This video will delve much more into that. But before I begin, I just want to say thank you to Atlas VPN for sponsoring today's video. Internet privacy is important, and if you're like 14-year-old Olivia who really wanted to go on Tumblr in China, VPNs are crucial. Atlas VPN honestly has a really impressive discount right now that it's only $1.39 per month with a 30-day money-back guarantee, which is definitely the cheapest VPN service I've ever come across. It has great internet speed. You can use it on multiple devices with just a single subscription. You don't have to worry about buying many different subscriptions. I think the best part for me is that because I live in Canada, Canadian Netflix sucks in comparison to American Netflix, so by switching my geographic location, I actually have access to way more shows. It also stops and notifies you of ads, links, and trackers that could be malicious. Atlas VPN even helps you save money with online shopping. Multiple worldwide services have their pricing adjusted based on economic metrics of different regions. So for many subscription services like Spotify or Netflix, if you change your location, you may actually get a huge price drop. If you're interested, you can click the link in the description box below and get Atlas VPN's discount deal of 86% off. Thank you again to Atlas VPN, and now to the video. The emergence and rise of modernist architecture has dramatically impacted the way American structures are designed and constructed. Above all, it emphasizes function. The form is to serve its functional purposes. As such, modernist architecture is known for a minimalist aesthetic, including simple linear elements, neutral color palettes, and little to no ornamentation. Heavily inspired by the emergence of scientific management, modernism also advocates for standardization and efficiency, championing the capacity of rational planning to produce the, quote, one best way of building. Metal, concrete, glass, and steel became the primary construction material, since man-made materials could be prefabricated and were more durable than natural materials such as limestone and brick. As Professor Wendy Steiner puts it, modernism advocated purity and monofunctionality, attempting to manage disjunction and diversity either by suppressing or vilifying them. In a paper by Mauro Gullian, I'm going to mispronounce a lot of names in this video, I am so sorry in advance, but in that guy's paper, he talks about a correlation between a country's speed of industrialization and their adoption of modernist architecture. After World War I, Britain, the United States, and Spain experienced the quickest industrialization, adoption of assembly line practices, mass production, and large growth of manufacturing companies. At the same time, those countries saw a Gothic revival in their architecture. By contrast, countries like Germany, Russia, and Italy experienced slower industrialization and a huge rise in modernism. It seems that in societies drastically impacted by industrialization, modernism became clumped into the overall industrial movement, whereas slower industrialization allowed modernist architecture to evolve by itself. Thus, European modernist architects wanted to try to make scientific management beautiful by reinterpreting it in aesthetic terms. By contrast, American modernism did not really get this unconstrained development as an art. It was more so a tool to serve mass production. So while there has been a general loss of architectural beauty in the West, America has experienced it more intensely, which is why I wanted to focus on America in this video. And when I talk about modernism, I am referring to the rationalized version of it that developed in America. After the Second World War, housing became one of the main social problems of the decade. In industrialized nations, urban cities were utterly unprepared for the mass influxes of citizens that migrated to cities, as well as the post-war baby boom, creating overcrowded and poor hygienic conditions. It was then that modernist architectural planning exploded in popularity as a proposed solution to the housing crisis. The modernists believed that they could design the best functioning, most efficient neighborhood and reproduce this blueprint by the masses, aided by this era's improved technology and standardized labor practices. They had faith in a one-size-fits-all solution. Most modernist projects were initially successful, but over time, many household types other than this standard nuclear family emerged. This increase in the diversity of living style was something the uniformity and repetition of rational modernist architecture could not address. It could not foster solidarity in communities because residents didn't see their connected identity reflected back by their neighborhood structures. Here then lies the loss of architectural beauty. Beauty, when referring to sensory experiences, such as a painting looking beautiful or a song sounding beautiful, is a highly subjective term, dependent on culture, geographic location, and time period, amongst other factors. Glenn Parsons' work, Beauty and Public Policy, claims that beauty produces a feeling of perfection in its particular context. Now you may say, wait, but what about all the things that are clearly imperfect, but I still find beautiful? The poorly knitted sweater from grandma, for instance, or my partner's crooked teeth. Well, Parsons writes, indeed, some beautiful things can seem, at first glance, quite imperfect. Great artists often break the rules of a particular art form or genre, producing works that, according to the traditional criteria, are imperfect instances of their kind. Unconventional works of this sort can sometimes be very beautiful. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, for example. Are these not examples of imperfect beauties? I think that when we find these works beautiful, we inevitably find that the artist has done something to perfection. For instance, it may seem to us that although a piece of music violates the rules of its genre, the composer has, amazingly, found the exact way to express a particular mood or feeling through his novel use of structure and melody. In regards to architectural beauty specifically, this would explain why a Gothic cathedral's combination of space and light is beautiful, because it evokes a religious awe. But the same Gothic style in a courtroom will come off as awkward. Courtrooms are meant to be serious and procedural, not spiritually inspiring. Of course, individuals can still disagree on what design is best suited for a given purpose. One person may want to build their cathedral in this way, the other may want to build it a different way. But collectively, neighborhoods retain a shared imaginative community. How perfectly architecture captures the identity of this shared community is the architectural beauty I'm talking about. What I mean here by identity is a unified expression of a set of material, biological, psychological, and/or cultural signs that differentiate groups, individuals, or cultures from one another. Since architecture is linked to all those things, it is a conveyor of a community's identity. For instance, architect Amos Rappaport, that was totally wrong, writes about how different cultures have very different design systems. This is why the spatial organization of schools, markets, houses, and bathrooms greatly differ between, say, Persian and American architecture. Building materials also play a crucial role in reflecting values. For example, using gold and marble will represent wealth and polish, whereas wood exudes warm and natural characteristics. Moreover, architecture relies on its context. Persepolis's meaning is understood in relation to its surrounding space, and if it is relocated to a different city such as Tokyo, it will lose its definition. And so in this video, architectural beauty or beautiful architecture is defined as architecture that accurately reflects the identity of the community it represents, such that it feels perfect. There, that's better. In his essay, The McDonaldization of Society, Ritzer describes the rationalization of society, that is, a society emphasizing efficiency, predictability, calculability, substitution of non-human for human technology, and control over uncertainty. Under this framework, I think architectural beauty is negatively affected by increasing and continuing emphasis on rationalization, which largely explains America's homogeneous planned housing developments. Given that efficiency prioritizes function and speed, modern architecture follows suit with its motto, form follows function.
The American architect Louis Sullivan expressed the credo of the modernists when he said that form follows function. In other words, stop thinking about the way a building looks and think instead about what it does.
Modernism aims to create standardized housing developments that can be pre-planned, applied universally, and demolished when deemed not useful enough. Although this creates easier, functional designs that can be built quickly, rational modernism's globalizing tendencies portray indigenous and non-modern architecture as bad, and modern rational architecture as the only good. Remember, modernist rational architecture believes that there is a one best way of building. However, obviously, communities vary in their history, culture, and values. So it is impossible to rationally develop a housing blueprint that perfectly captures the essence of all communities. Its capacity to be architecturally beautiful is limited. When individuals are surrounded by architecture that poorly reflects their community's identity, individuals actually internalize the negative emotions evoked by the external ugliness, resulting in higher rates of dissatisfaction, depression, and boredom. This shouldn't come off as too surprising, considering we know that our external environment and its appearance has a considerable impact on the way we feel inside.
This building is boarded up because nobody has a use for it. Nobody has a use for it because nobody wants to be in it. Nobody wants to be in it because the thing is so damned ugly.
Calculability exacerbates the disregard for architectural beauty by focusing on how many buildings can be built rather than how beautiful the buildings are, evident in many rational projects such as Gropius, May, and Le Corbusier. Just please read the text on the screen. I'm so sorry once again. They wrote papers on what they called the minimum existence housing unit. The minimum existence housing unit was the smallest possible apartment that an average family could comfortably inhabit. The three architects measured success by the number of houses they could fit into one neighborhood, rather than the architecture's connection with a community's identity. Moreover, as architectural design becomes increasingly simple and repeatable, non-human technology holds a greater presence, where computers are able to copy past designs and create new, similar ones. Model-based software development has grown in popularity because it has a library full of source models, reusable components, and transformation rules that allow it to engage in automatic processes of design. The creative touch of individual architects is fading. Despite these harms of a rationalized society, Ritzer says it is still preferable to the pre-rationalized way of life. And I know it sounds like I've been shitting on modernist, rational forms of architecture, but I probably agree. After World War II, the mass rationalization of America's planned housing developments no doubt lifted millions of citizens out of poverty, improved hygienic conditions, and largely solved overcrowding. It was very important at this time to produce as many functional houses as possible. Who cares if they all looked the same and had no connection to the local residents? Thus, rather than force all architects to return to a pre-rationalized way of life, perhaps we should find ways to control rationalization, such as having the state subsidize urban planning corporations and architectural firms that produce architecturally beautiful structures. This creates a rational incentive, namely lower cost, for beauty. Or, post-secondary architecture programs could mandate their students to take a neuroaesthetics course so that architecture students recognize the importance of considering architectural beauty alongside function. We could also support architectural conservation organizations that aim to preserve beautiful buildings and protect them from being demolished. In the British government's National Planning Policy Framework from last year, they proposed putting a greater concentration on designing neighborhoods based on local residents' wishes. Local councils would be asked to formulate their own unique local design code as an outline for design standards that architects and planners must adapt to meet, or else their designs will not get approved. And I think this can be seen as a preventative measure against extreme calculability, where urban planners just try to build as many buildings as possible. Moreover, to protect against rationalization's frequent demolition practices, the government is urging communities to nominate historically or culturally significant architectural structures to their local council's heritage list for preservation. Now, whether this proposal has actually been working, I am not sure. If there are any Brits who are watching this with some knowledge about it, let me know. Now that's great and all. We care about architectural beauty, yay! But why is it the government's responsibility to help spread architectural beauty if it's not an essential good? The basic needs theory asserts that state provision is justified when distributing basic necessities, such as food, shelter, healthcare, etc. However, it doesn't go deeper than necessity, which leaves us wondering. The government should supply basic goods to live, but what should they supply to live well? The theory has a neutral stance on our understanding of the good life, making the basic needs theory useless for discussing the supply of discretionary goods. These are goods that are not necessities, but are still socially considered to be very valuable, such as music or art. The democracy theory tries to fill in the gaps of the basic needs theory by saying that if the state is supposed to remain neutral about what is good, then their supply of discretionary goods should be determined by the majority. The issue with this, though, is that it excludes minority preferences. It also fails to consider that perhaps there are some discretionary goods that are just by principle intrinsically valuable and underproduced by the free market. Quality education. And so maybe we think it is the responsibility of the government to subsidize those goods no matter what the majority votes. This is why I think Margaret Kohn's theory of solidarity is strong. It takes these non-essential but still highly valuable goods and says the government ought to provide them to the public. It's not a choice, but an obligation. You see, modern society is very interdependent due to the division of labor, resulting in social products rather than individual ones. Just think about the chair that I'm sitting on. It was not made by one or two craftsmen. It was made by shipping materials to China, then shipping that to build a base in Britain, and then that's shipped off to like Italy to paint, and then the leather is constructed in Japan. I hope you know I'm throwing out random countries here. I have no idea what the actual process of construction for this chair was. Even the value of land is not just based on this independent plot of land. It includes its proximity to markets, infrastructure, transit, schools. The land may be owned privately, but its value is produced socially. Public spaces are crucial to creating awareness of our interdependence. Although some people may care more about, say, the public park nearby than others, they all still indirectly relate to one another in the sharing of public space, forming an imagined community. We feel a sense of solidarity with people, connected by access to this public space. But when all planned housing developments look like rows of closed-off drab boxes, it is much harder for residents to feel any special ties to the people around them. Some may argue that rationalization and architectural beauty are not completely incompatible. The shared imaginative community that public space creates comes from its publicness, not its beauty. Whether a public park has swings, a garden, slides, or a basketball court does not interfere with the fact that the park functions as a public space for people to walk through and spend time in, coming across all different types of people in society. Teenagers will still go to their local community's park to spend time in with friends, even if it looks the exact same as all other parks. It is the people themselves that enable public spaces to reflect community identity and make architecture beautiful. However, I think the beauty of public spaces can have important implications on how good the solidarity is. In neighborhoods, residents are forced to observe its architecture anytime they step out their door. Ones that beautifully capture community identity act as a constant reminder of solidarity. It visually exemplifies the local community's indirect connectivity with one another, whereas ugly architecture alienates. Plus, if public spaces are supposed to create awareness of interdependence, then why do only rich communities get beautiful architecture? Rich people are also very dependent on the labor of those who live in planned housing developments and less wealthy suburbs. In Kohn's eyes, the higher socioeconomic classes have a, quote, quasi-contractual debt to society, which they can repay by making discretionary goods, like architectural beauty, public. Now, don't get me wrong, beauty is not the most important thing. Having a place to live at all is top priority. Instead, I think there is a trade-off. When housing development planners have to think about how to make their neighborhoods beautiful, it will definitely disrupt the speed at which neighborhoods can be built. Since shelter is a basic necessity, it is an essential public good that should be prioritized over architectural beauty, a non-essential good / discretionary good, as we've been saying. Thus, even if rationalization reduces the qualitative effectiveness of solidarity, i.e. how effective solidarity is, if we speak in numbers, its efficient spread of housing developments does produce more opportunities for solidarity to occur. However, now that it's been over half a century since the post-war housing crisis, present America no longer has an extreme shortage of housing. There is still absolutely a shortage of affordable housing, and it's terrible, but it's not to the same extent as the 1940s and 50s. There is now an opportunity to potentially mend the damage that rational architecture has done to architectural beauty. Firstly, in capitalist America, architectural beauty is obviously underproduced by the free market because, again, beautiful architecture takes more time and effort and may not use the most cost-effective methods. Meanwhile, the rich possess a disproportionate ability to reside in beautiful housing developments. But as a very valuable discretionary good, one should not have to pay huge money just to access architectural beauty. And due to society's interdependence, the wealthy are obligated to make architectural beauty a public good. Now, the rational modernist may say, no need. Those people that complain about ugly neighborhoods can work on beautiful interior design instead. But the problem is that this simply transforms architectural beauty into another private good, defeating the purpose of increasing the accessibility of goods for less affluent communities. Interior design is exclusive only to those who can enter that building. Hence, at large, interior design's purpose is to reflect the identity of individual residents, not the community. Comparatively, the exterior architecture is observed by all, and it must coordinate with the appearance of other neighborhood structures, making each building a contributor to community identity. Our conversation ends then with this. The state is justified in subsidizing planned housing projects that consider architectural beauty, with a particular emphasis on projects for less affluent communities. I acknowledge that the government may be a questionable primary funder. Nazi and Soviet communist leadership have both utilized architecture for political means by selectively conserving monuments that send political messages, or rearranging public space in a way that makes surveillance easier. So it is important to think about accountability measures that can prevent governments from subsidizing developments they deem beautiful rather than the actual local residents' wishes. What's that? You made it to the end of this convoluted video? Well, then I want to leave you off with a quote from architect Gropius. The assumption that the industrialization of housing construction entails a decline in aesthetic values is erroneous. On the contrary, the standardization of structural elements will have the wholesome result of lending a common character to new residential buildings and neighborhoods. Well-manufactured materials and clear, simple design of these mass-produced elements will guarantee the unified beauty of the resulting buildings. If architectural beauty is meant to reflect a community's shared identity as perfectly as possible, then perhaps rationalized architecture can indeed be beautiful when the purpose is to be machine-like, such as a community of factory workers. But whether rational modernists are able to guarantee beauty in planned housing developments is quite a different story. If you kind of enjoyed this video, you can like and subscribe. I'm not too sure how this video turned out, to be honest, but we will see based on the feedback. Thank you so much for watching. Let's keep talking, and I hope to hear from you soon. Bye!